So, one of the realities of being a world traveler, especially a solo traveler, is the reality of coming into a city that you don't know very well, finding accommodations for yourself, and dealing with the things that could go wrong in that situation. So, let me tell you a story. Um, so, I had to move out of my Airbnb. Um, when I first got to Nairobi, I had found an Airbnb in Kileleshwa. And so one of the realities of staying in a city that you don't know very well is that all of your research has to be online about what area to stay in, where do I want to be, what do I want to be close to, are there cafes in the area, restaurants, shops, malls, parks, all of these kinds of things. Is it safe? Is it safe at night? Is it safe during the day? How far is it from where I want to be? All of these questions you have to ask yourself. So I found myself an Airbnb in Kileleshwa, and the pictures looked good. You know, there were a few questionable things in the pictures, but I chose it because of its location, because it seemed to have a lot of natural light. It was surrounded by greenery, and also because it was close to a park where I could walk and kind of run, walk, exercise, whatever, every morning. And so when I first got there, I checked it over and I was like, okay, I've stayed in a variety of places around the world, so I can tend to roll with the punches. I've stayed in high-end, beautiful, gorgeous spaces, and I've stayed in places where I've looked around and said, "Oh, I'm glad I'm only here for a couple of nights because this is a little rough." So I looked around the place. It was okay. I said, "Okay, this will be doable." But one thing that I did notice in the first couple of days is that my allergies were out of control. And what I chalked that up to was the fact that I knew that the rainy season had, just come to an end. And in the US, in the spring, when it's raining a lot, everything is in full bloom. If you live in an area that has a lot of greenery, the greenery is in full bloom. There's lots of pollen in the air, and all of these things are in the air. And so my allergies kick up during that time of the year. And so I kind of assumed that it was a similar thing happening. I'm like, I know the rainy season just ended. It's also a bit cooler outside. There's probably a lot of stuff in the air. And so my allergies are kicking up. So I just kind of chalked it up to that. But then what I started to notice as time went on was that when I was outside of the apartment, I was fine. I would go to the park every day. I would walk. I was fine. But then I would come back into the apartment, and at night, when I would come back in the evening or in the middle of the day, whatever, my breathing would get tight. My chest would get tight. My nose was stuffy, like I was waking up every morning, stuffy nose, runny nose, itchy, watery eyes, sneezing, coughing, itchy throat, the whole shebang. And I was like, this is weird because when I'm out of the apartment, I'm fine. When I'm in the apartment, I'm not fine. And every day it's something slightly different. And I woke, as a kid, I had asthma. So I know what it feels like, like to have a tight chest and to have labored breathing. I am very aware and accustomed to that feeling. So it doesn't terrify me. It just, it awakens me that something is happening. There's some allergen in the air that's irritating me. And I didn't know what it was. But I was like, there's something in this apartment. And I had noticed that, the building is kind of old. The apartment was old, huge, high vaulted ceilings, huge windows, hardwood floors, rugs and carpets, and a lot of wood detailing like around the windows. And so I was like, well, it's an older building. It's an older apartment. It's probably very dusty. And the room that I was in had this huge window, vaulted ceilings, and then there were these wooden beams that kind of framed the window, and there were curtains. And I'm like, I don't know when the last time those curtains were washed. So I'm like, it's probably just dusty in the room. And so I reached out to my Airbnb host and I told him what was going on. I was like, yeah, my allergies are on 10. Like, it's kind of crazy. I was like, let me know about the cleaning schedule because I want to make sure that the room is cleaned very well. It seems like it's probably a bit dusty. And he said, well, it might be dusty. It's been a while since the last person stayed in the room. So it's been a while since it was like cleaned regularly. And I said, all right, well, just, have the cleaners come in and do whatever they're going to do. And hopefully that'll take care of the situation. There were also other few issues that I had to talk to him about. Like, there was a lack of hot water in the bathroom, which eventually did get rectified. But then also the Wi-Fi was kind of horrible. Like, it was just rough. And so he said, all right, we'll have the cleaners come in and do what they do. Let me know, how things are going. There are also a lot of plants in the apartment. And he was like, let me know if the plant in your room is an issue, which it wasn't. I didn't have an issue with the plants. So the person came in, they cleaned, but the problem did not go away. I was still sneezy, still stuffy, still runny nose, still eyes watering, coughing, scratchy throat. But the thing that concerned me the most was the fact that my breathing was labored, especially at night when I was trying to sleep. And I said, I can't do this. So there was a day where I was making a YouTube video and I was trying to move some things around in the background just to kind of give myself, a better background picture. And there were like shelves on the walls with little plants and picture frames on the shelves and everything. And so I picked up one of the picture frames to swap it out with another picture, picked up the picture frame, kind of just randomly turned it over and saw that there was mold all on the back of the picture frame. Like the top third of the picture frame, green mold. And I was like, ugh. And then I saw on the wall that the picture frame had been leaning against, there was mold on the wall. And I was like, okay, I've dealt with mold before, both in an apartment in New York and in an apartment in LA. Mold is not something to play with. People get seriously ill from mold, but also mold can cause allergy-like symptoms. All of the symptoms that I was having are symptoms of, mold inhalation. And I was like, oh. So now I'm looking around the apartment like, oh, God only knows where else the mold is. It's maybe in the walls. It's on the wood. It's, maybe on this curtain in my room. Maybe, God only knows where it is. And so finally, after I stayed in that apartment for almost 2 weeks, and I was just like, I can't. I'm sick every morning, sneezing, coughing, watery eyes, stuffy nose, can't breathe every day. And I said, I can't, the remainder of my time in Nairobi, I can't wake up like this every day. This is not going to work. Not to mention the fact that the Wi-Fi was really, really bad. I had connectivity issues every single day. There was a night that I had a meeting and I had reached out to him the day before the meeting to tell him, listen, I'm still having an issue with the Wi-Fi. Like, I don't know what's happening. And I said, I have a meeting tonight and I need it to be fixed for the meeting. He gave me a couple of things to do, which I didn't really have time to do everything before the meeting, but there was like an extender. He was like, point the extender towards your room. And if that doesn't work, there's another router. You can go upstairs and bring it down and all of these things. Needless to say, those things didn't work. The meeting was very, very spotty, but thankfully the person on the other end understood and, we got through it. But so anyway, I reached out to my Airbnb host and I said, listen, I said, the Wi-Fi issue is still a really big issue, but I said, also these allergies, I said, there's something in the house that is irritating me, that's bothering me. And I said, I can't spend the rest of my time in Nairobi feeling like this. So I'm going to have to find another place to stay. And he said, his response was, okay, let me know what you decide. Okay. So the next day, I actually met some people here in the city, some ladies here in the city. We went out for lunch and I told them what was happening. And I told them that I saw the mold and they're like, yeah, girl, you got to get out of there. Like, there's probably mold everywhere, you never know. And what I know happens often is that people see mold and they just paint over it, but they don't clean it first, which doesn't really get rid of the problem. It's just a painted over problem now, but the joint is still growing. Mold is still growing. So Anyway, I started looking for another place to stay. One of the other ladies was so gracious to help me. And she was like, yeah, when I first got here, I stayed at this place because my housing fell through and I was able to get a really great deal at this hotel. And I can take you there and I can talk to the guy and da da da. So we did that. And all the while I'm still looking on Airbnb to find another place. So I found another place. I reach out to my Airbnb host and I say, listen, I found another place. I'm going to move within the next couple days. I think it was like the next day or the following day. I'm going to move. And I'm reaching out to them to find out what's the earliest I can come, but I want to make sure it's okay for you if I check out by 2:40. He said, sure, that's fine. And I said, I don't remember exactly how I said it, but I said something along the lines of, let me know how we can move forward with the refund for the remainder of my stay because I had paid for my complete stay already. And he said, well, you'll have to talk to Airbnb about that. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I don't know how refunds work. You'll have to reach out to Airbnb to talk about a refund. And I'm like, well, I've stayed in Airbnbs for a very long time, many, many years, all over the world, literally. It's been very few times that I've had to get a refund. But I know how it works, especially if you've already paid for the entire stay. So if you go on Airbnb, there is a process whereby if you need to cut your trip short, you change the dates of your trip. It will let you know what the amount of the overpayment is if you've already paid for the full trip. It'll tell you the amount of, what your refund might be. Now, everybody has a different policy when it comes to refunds. Some people are like, no refunds at all. Other people are like, you get a refund of a certain amount after this amount of a stay or whatever. So everybody's policy is different. At this point, I'm not really looking at his policy because I'm like, your apartment is making me sick. So as far as I'm concerned, you should be gracious and understanding and empathetic and reasonable and give me a refund if I'm not going to be staying here for another month or however long it is. So I go through the Airbnb channels to request a refund. And I reached out to him and I said, I went through Airbnb to request the refund. And his response was, well, that's not how it works. And I said, what do you mean? That's not how what works? I said, you told me to go through Airbnb. I went through Airbnb. I sent you the refund request. He denied it. He said, that's not how it works. I have a no refund policy. And I said, so then I call him because I'm like, I'm not going to, we're on WhatsApp. I'm not going to go back and forth on WhatsApp about this. So I called him. And the conversation did not go great. Didn't go great at all. Basically, and I think this is really one of the most disappointing parts of this whole situation is that his mentality or his response was very much like, well, what does it have to do with me? What is it? What does it mean for me? He's like, you got sick. Neither one of us knew that this would happen. So, why should I take the hit and give you a refund? And I said, well, because it's your apartment. And I've been very vocal about these issues. And I've been vocal about how I'm feeling ill, allergies, whatever it is. I said, it's your apartment. So if I leave, why should I still be responsible for paying for the amount of time that I'm not here? That doesn't make any sense. It's also very unreasonable and very unkind. I said that. And he was like, well, it's not my, this is an unforeseen situation and it's a financial hardship for me and I can't refund you. And I said, so what you're saying is that I'm sick in your apartment. I'm sick in your apartment because I've told you what's happening in the apartment. I said, there is mold. I've seen it. And it's causing allergy issues, but also mold can cause bigger issues if it's not dealt with. I said, all this and what you're saying is it doesn't matter. I should still have to pay for it. And he's like, well, don't put words in my mouth. I'm saying I'm not putting words in your mouth. But what I am saying is that that I'm leaving your apartment. I've already told you. I've already arranged another Airbnb. So that I'm leaving. So you're saying that I should still be responsible to pay for however many more weeks here, even though I'm not going to be staying here. I'm like, that's unreasonable. So at one point we get disconnected. I'm not sure if we got disconnected or if he hung up on me. He also, I think, threw a couple microaggressions my way, which I let slide because I'm like, I don't have time for that kind of foolishness. I don't have time for that. I'm going to deal with the issue at hand. So he's like, well, you'll just have to take it up with Airbnb. You'll have to talk to them about it because I'm not gonna refund you, and you can just leave my property. So I did take it up with Airbnb, and I spent a couple hours, not a couple hours. I spent a good chunk of time on the phone with Airbnb, telling them the situation, and they were like, if you say there's mold, please send us pictures of the mold so that we have it and so that we can reach out to him with the pictures. And I told them also about the Wi-Fi issues and the water issues. And they said, well, if you can send us any documentation about those things, please do. I said, well, I don't have any documentation about the Wi-Fi, but all I have are the text messages between the two of us where we've been talking about all these issues. And the guy was like, well, send me screenshots of, the text messages, which I did. So I sent him screenshots of the text messages. I sent him pictures of the mold that was on the walls and on the picture frame, sent it all to him. And by the next day, Airbnb refunded my money. Not only did they refund the amount that I would no longer be there, but they refunded me extra that they said was for my trouble during my stay. And see, here's the thing. First of all, thank you, Airbnb. Secondly, if this guy had been willing to work with me, the refund would have been less. But because he refused to even try to come up with any kind of solution, and he literally said, what does it have to do with me? Why should I take the hit? Now you got to pay up more. You did that to yourself, sir. You did it to yourself. And like I said, I think the thing that was most disheartening was that attitude. I've had issues with Airbnb before, not with the company, but there was one time I was staying in an Airbnb in Montreal and it got broken into while I was there. And the owners weren't there. But when I called them and told them the situation, they were so apologetic. They were embarrassed because they were like, this never happens in this area. They were so apologetic and they were like, we will refund you everything. Please, we want you to be safe. We're so sorry. I had to fill out a police report and all of these things. They spoke with the police. Like, they were so cooperative to fix the situation. There was another time I stayed in an Airbnb and the power went out. I had like 2 days left. The power went out, never came back on. Literally slept through the night with no power. And it never came back in the morning. And the person was like, I'm so sorry. There's a situation happening in the neighborhood. If you want to find another Airbnb, I'll refund you the rest of your stay. And I'll take you to the next Airbnb. So like, I've had issues before where something happens in the apartment that's no one's fault, but the Airbnb owner is gracious and wants to find a way to work it out. And yes, as the owner of the Airbnb or as the host or whatever, you take the hit. When something happens in your apartment, you take the hit. That's kind of how the thing works. But it was just so unfortunate to me that this guy was so unwilling to come up with any solution. It was all just, well, this is going to be a financial hardship to me and I can't refund you, and you'll just have to take it up with them. And then even after Airbnb refunded me, he sent me a message and said, I see that Airbnb refunded you. I'm going to appeal and fight it, but you're welcome to leave my property. I'm like, you're still fighting to get money back for a time that I won't be here. And what's crazy is that your listing is still on Airbnb. You could rent this room out tomorrow and make your money back. So you're not really at a loss. I mean, hopefully Airbnb will I don't know, do a little bit more investigation and make sure that he, cleans the mold in the apartment. But they probably have no way of, forcing him to do that. But I'm like, this little bit of mold that I saw, I know there's more in here. I know there's more. 'Cause I know there is. So you could choose to be honest and take it down and clean the apartment and check it, or you could choose not to. But if you choose not to, you could easily make your money back starting as soon as tomorrow. So that really didn't sit well with me, that he was so unwilling to even try to come up with any kind of solution. And I was talking to one of the ladies that I had met about the situation, and she was like, "Girl, you never know. He may literally have $0 in his account." And I'm like, I understand that, and if that's the case, and that did cross my mind, and I'm thinking, if that's the case, I'm sorry for that, and also, I can't be responsible to pay for a huge chunk of time that I'm not going to be here. That can't fall on me. Again, as the owner of the Airbnb or the leaser of the unit or whatever, that falls on you. That is part of the responsibility of being an Airbnb host, is making sure that your property, that your units are clean, that there are no allergens. If someone reaches out to you and says, "Hey, I'm having this issue," that you do what's necessary to fix the issue. And if the person has to leave because they literally are having tightness of breath and watery eyes, scratchy throat, sneezing, coughing, all of the things, it's your responsibility to make sure that people aren't getting sick in your house. So there's that. So that's one of the realities. I found a new Airbnb. I'm here, and it's fine. And I'm glad that I was able to recover my funds. Yeah. So that's one of the realities of hopping around the world, is you never know what you're going to get. You never know you never know how things are going to transpire, and you just have to learn how to roll with those punches. And you got to learn to speak up for yourself, and not be, I don't know, bullied or convinced not to speak up for yourself, because your safety and your health are of the utmost importance. And there's that. Thank you for listening to my story. I will say that I'm in this new neighborhood. It's different. The walkability score that I would give the previous neighborhood was maybe like a 8, 9. The walkability score here, I would say, is like a 5 or 6. And I think that's mostly because there's a lot of construction happening on the street. Thankfully, I'm on a higher floor, so not a lot of noise comes in to bother me. Like, I hear it a little bit, but it's not bothersome. But it's kind of hard to walk because it's just like, there's like, construction literally everywhere. But I am on a high floor. I have a view. I get good light, as you can see, and I'm very thankful for that. And it's cozy and private. It was a little bit cold, and thankfully they brought some blankets my way and some things. Yeah, so that's the reality of travel. I gotta go because I have an audition to prepare for, but thank y'all for listening. As always, my name is Tryphena Wade. If you are not subscribed yet, please take a second, subscribe, and yeah, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.